Normally we start with a short meditation, and that's gives us all an opportunity to gather and really become present with one another. And so let's begin by you can, find a posture where you feel supported, where your spine feels supported, but you're not straining to sit upright. And you can close your eyes and just sense your base, sense your feet on the floor, butt in the chair, sensing your posture, making any adjustments you need to make to feel supported, to be relaxed and yet awake. Feel your feet making contact with the floor and just sense your feet. So whatever you feel in your feet, your toes, your arch of your foot, the heel of your foot, top of your foot, feel the sense of temperature or your foot making contact with your sock if you're wearing a sock or shoes. And you can start to feel your attention, your consciousness or awareness filling your feet. It's almost like you may feel it as a kind of uh, fluid awareness filling your feet. And you can just let that fluid awareness of sensing move up into your ankles and into your lower legs, so that you become aware of not only your feet, but also your lower legs. You're sensing, becoming more embodied in your lower legs, and allowing that fluid kind of attention to move into your knees and into your upper legs, your thighs, and back of your legs, front of your upper legs. And allowing that awareness to flow, if it feels like flow, into your hips. And from there, it can move into your hands. So sensing each one of your fingers, both hands, palms of your hands, backs of your hands. Feeling your hands resting on whatever they're resting on. Allowing the awareness to move into your lower arms. Just noticing whatever sensations are there. You may also notice that there are places where there seems to be no sensation, just being aware of that. Letting your attention, your awareness move into your elbows and then flow up into your upper arms, into your shoulders. And you can allow the awareness to fill your neck and gently flow into your head, sensing your whole head, your face, the back of your head, top of your head, your ears, nose, eyes, eyeballs in the sockets. And then allowing that fluid awareness, kind of liquid attention, to gently flow down from your head through your core and begin to gather in your lower belly. So that your attention becomes concentrated in your lower belly. And just for the next few minutes, we'll sit together with our attention focused in the lower belly. And if your mind wanders away, and just bring it back to sensing that area of your lower belly, feeling your breath moving in the belly until I ring the bell to end the meditation. So, once again, welcome for anyone who joined during the meditation. Nice to see you all on a Saturday morning, at least morning for me. I don't know what it is where you are. So, we've been doing these webinars just about every month for a few years. It's really to give uh, people a flavor of the Diamond Approach spiritual path. And so you can see if this is something you want to get more involved with. But you might be scratching your head saying, okay, so it's a spiritual path. Why am I going to talk about relationships? Well, part of the reason is because it's what I felt like talking about. I think relationships are important to me personally. So it seemed like a juicy topic people might relate to. But I think as we'll see, relationships can also be an important part of our inner journey, both in terms of realizing our inner nature and in terms of expressing that. But traditionally in many cultures, there would have been kind of a divide between doing inner work and living a personal life. Like if you were drawn to do spiritual work, you'd go off to maybe like a monastery and you'd live in a pretty prescribed way that would downplay personal expression. You might renounce the world. In many traditions, personal life was felt to be a distraction, even sometimes a delusion. But for most of us, probably all of us here, personal life's not a distraction, it's central. And I think we probably understand by now that doing spiritual work and having a worldly personal life, they're not incompatible. In fact, many Eastern spiritual traditions that would have uh, traditionally been monastic have come to the West and, in one way or another, adapted themselves to our Western culture, which does value individuality and personal expression. But the diamond approach was actually developed in the modern West, and it uh, explicitly integrates our heartfelt desires to realize and know our inner depth and truth, and to live a fulfilling personal life. So we understand that deep and timeless spiritual truths are kind of like hiding within our ordinary worldly experience. And that, by working with our individual day-to-day experience, we can uncover these deep truths. And we call that process of uncovering truth realization or awakening. But there's another step, and that we call actualization. When we can experience the freedom of the realized condition in our functioning, in our relating. In other words, we don't lose touch with our spiritual realization when we're living in the world, talking, working, playing, making dinner, making love. So it means I'm myself, I'm authentic, and I'm responsive in a way that expresses the depth of what I am. That is my realization. And it's also at the same time expressing my uniqueness. So, truth, which we call true nature, what we are at our core, it's the same for all of us. but the way it comes through each of us is different. So you could say each of us is a unique manifestation of the ocean of reality. It's a boundless, timeless ocean that has many waves. And each wave is different from every other one without being separate. So on the inner journey, we're interested in truth. We're driven by love of truth, love of authenticity. We want to be real. And as we realize the deeper truth of who and what we really are, that authenticity can manifest in our lives, can enrich our relating, make relating more real. But the reverse is also true. You know, if we can approach our relationships with openness, sincerity, authenticity, then relationships can become a support for our inner journey. Like even a kind of crucible for inner work. We could say, we could consider relationship as a kind of practice, natural practice that deepens our sense of who we are and what reality is. And at the same time, relating in that way can be really satisfying and nourishing. So that's what we're aiming at here. And, you know, it might sound like kind of a tall order, but you might find that even a small shift in perspective can be really liberating. I mean, if you think about it, normally much of our relating is kind of an effort to get our social, sexual, and survival needs met. And that's definitely important. We need to take care of those needs. But what if we could also view our relationships as vehicles for inner development rather than just the means to get those needs met? Like, is it possible to experience relationship as a place to express inner realization and spiritual values? But we don't want to make that a should, you know. Oh, you know, now I should be spiritual in my relationship, like as if it's not hard enough to just be, you know, sometimes just be nice to my partner or to my kids or to my parents or whoever. And the truth is, you know, much of our difficulty and struggle has to do with other humans, how we feel in relation to other people. Much of our joy and fulfillment, and also much of our pain and suffering has to do with our relationships, whether it's difficulties we have in our relationships or the pain of loss we feel when a relationship ends. So, you know, on the spiritual journey, we're going places that we can't anticipate, and some oftentimes we can't even imagine. So we need an adventurous attitude. We need to be open. We need to be transparent, vulnerable. Otherwise, we're just going to stay in our normal range of experience and perception. Like we tend to stay with what we know because it feels safe. And our fear of the unknown, of opening, our lack of inner transparency, you could say, really it's mainly connected to difficulties we have with other people, especially in our early childhood. Because you could say that relationship is a context that literally created our mind, our sense of self, how we see the world. And so relationships can constrict and limit the way we see ourselves in the world, or they can become, you know, windows to see more clearly who we are and what the possibilities of our life are. So our spiritual realization is more complete and full when we can bring that realization into our interactions with other people, bring our presence, our compassion, our clarity, understanding, like how we talk with one another, how we respond, how we touch and are touched, what we do and don't do. It's, inner freedom means the freedom to express the qualities of our nature: love, joy, kindness, strength, intelligence, sensitivity. I mean, how are we going to express our love if not with other people? You could express it with your cat, but it's deeper with other folks. How are we going to express our courage, our intelligence, sensitivity? It's with other people. And of course, a relationship between two people can be more or less real. And realness means, uh, what is authentically me contacting what is authentically you. I'm being myself and I'm completely open to you. And I think it's natural that we just love relating that way. It's, actually one of the most popular themes in movies, songs, books. I love you because when I'm with you, I can be myself. It's like a cliche at this point, really, but people are still making movies and films and songs about it because it's such a deep, universal human wish. I mean, recently I watched K-pop Demon Hunters. There it is. So we tend to be drawn to people who with whom we feel we can be ourselves. We can be authentic. People who point us to our depth. It's simple truth that as humans, we love to be real and we love to express that realness with other humans and with our cats. And of course, relating is an actual need for us. It's well known that babies don't thrive even physically if they don't have enough positive relating, like loving holding, touching, eye contact. And that need for relationship, it continues throughout our lives. And it's expressed, if you think about it, so many ways. Like we have our family relationships, lovers, friends, religious or spiritual groups, community organizations, political organizations. It's probably safe to say that for everyone here, a day doesn't go by without engaging in some kind of relationship with another person. And for most of us, the quality of those relationships becomes more and more important. Quality means realness, depth, intimacy, right? Like if you take a moment, just contemplate your most satisfying relationships. What is them? What is it that makes them satisfying? You don't need to answer, just sense into that question. Feel what comes up for you. Like if you think about, being in your teens or 20s, I think most of us here are a bit older than that. Um, might have been doing sports together or discussing great books or art or having fantastic sex. But, certainly as we get older, more mature, it seems more important to connect in some kind of deeper way. We want to be authentically ourselves and we want to relate to another. We want to relate in a real way with another person who's being authentically themselves. So we want to be intimate. We want to be as close as we can possibly be, and not just physically, but like on all levels: physical, emotional, spiritual. And being close, that means that we're showing up as fully as we can. Like nothing's in the way, nothing comes between us. And I think we all know that it's actually really hard to be real in relationship, even when often we don't know exactly why. You might feel like we have to mold ourselves into something to be in a relationship, or we have to hold back parts of ourselves. We probably have a bunch of different selves or personas that we use in different situations with different people. Like, have you ever had an interaction? You come away, maybe it's like at a party or something. You come away feeling just kind of like, oh, yuck, like an uneasy feeling that whatever you're being in that interaction just didn't feel real. And you know, it might feel kind of gross. Maybe, sometimes you even feel like you made a great impression, but just something feels just kind of off, like you weren't being you. And we don't need to give ourselves a hard time about that. We don't need to make being real in relationship a goal. It's just natural, normal that we want to be real with each other. We want to be able to show up with all of what we are. And it's normal. We find that's difficult. But, we want to just follow our heart's desire to be real in relationships. If we can do that, it'll naturally lead us to try to understand what gets in the way. So that's what we want to explore. Like, what makes it so hard to be real with other people, to show up fully in our relationships? I was reminded of a quote by, um, the great Sufi poet Rumi. Andreas talked a lot about Rumi in our last webinar, but yeah, Rumi said, "Your task is not to seek for love, but to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you've built against it." So for most of us, probably the most important factor, shaping how we show up, has to do with our early history around relating. We learned our relational patterns very early in life, like starting with the very first moments with our mother or, mothering person. I'm going to use the term mother. It's a shorthand, but, I mean a mothering person, whoever's doing the typical mothering functions of caretaking, feeding, so on for in the first part of your life. In the first few months, a baby doesn't really know herself as separate from the environment, and particularly not as separate from her mother. But gradually, during the first year or two, there's a process of separation and individuation. As this individuation happens, the baby learns that the mother is a person, her own person, separate person. And the baby learns to adjust herself to the environment and to the mother in order to get her needs met. Like, for example, maybe the mother is anxious and overwhelmed, and too much crying causes her to put the baby down and go away. So the baby might learn to moderate her crying in order to accommodate to the mother's state. The baby learns, unconsciously, um, that she needs to tamp down her aliveness, her emotions. Like she's learning to swallow her distress. And that's a pattern that could get carried forward and that can affect that person, how that person relates throughout their whole life. Like maybe they're always emotionally reserved in their relationships. So they don't question it. They don't even know they're doing it probably. They might even judge others for being too emotional or too demanding. That's just how relationships are for that person. And it probably drives their partner crazy. You never tell me how you're feeling. Is that familiar to anyone? Or maybe when you were a baby, you needed to cry and cry, get your mother's attention. You learned you had to over emote, and that could carry through to your adult relationships. And maybe, your partner gets frustrated because, you're always so dramatic. Or when you're older, maybe 2 or 3 years old, maybe you had to find just the right distance from your mother. Like, like if your mom was focused on a younger sibling. If you got too close or too demanding, she'd push you away or put you in the dreaded playpen. So you found just the right distance to be close to your mother without getting pushed away. And then it becomes about her needs. And that could carry through to your adult relationships. Like you would prioritize the other person's needs in relationship. Maybe you have great radar for the other person's needs, the right distance. But maybe you don't even know what you want. And of course, most of us probably don't remember how it was with our mother when we were just a few months old or even 2 or 3 years old. But our own patterns in relationship can be a clue. Like if you touch into that and feel what it's like for you, you might begin to get a sense of your mother, like coloring how you relate or how you perceive the other person in the relationship. You could start to recognize the ways that how you relate is patterned by that first relationship with your mom. And of course, when we're a little older, the fathering person comes more into the picture. Like we think of the fathering role as guiding the child to do things in the world, like supporting a sense of capacity, self-reliance, like could be, helping the child learn to swim or ride a bike or, how to fix the bike when it got broken. So if our parents are loving and supportive while we're learning to navigate the world, we can learn to be confident in ourselves and our abilities. But maybe your father was critical, like always criticizing your looks or your intelligence or how you did in sports or at school. And that could be in your adult relationships. Then you might be constantly seeking validation from the other person because you just don't feel that inner confidence for yourself. But how was it with your father? Maybe your actual father was absent, but you had a older sibling or someone else who served the fathering functions, like teaching you how to do things and being a role model for the larger world. Like all of us got some amount of that from someone. Like maybe it was your father, but maybe somebody else. And of course, there could have been neglect or abuse in the household. Maybe there's substance abuse. The child needs you, as a child, you need to relate to your parents to survive. But it could, for some of us, it could have been frightening sometimes. If someone was drinking or using drugs or mentally unstable, maybe you never knew what you were going to be faced with. So you could have learned that, relationship was like walking in a minefield. When you're with another person, you're always looking out for bad mother or bad father. You can't, it's hard to settle in relationship. Maybe you just decided it wasn't worth it to get into a close relationship because it just feels too fraught. Remember that classic Peanuts comic strip where Linus says, I love mankind. It's people I can't stand. Some of us probably feel exactly like that. And of course, all kinds of other family arrangements are possible and common. Like maybe your parents were unstable, but there could have been grandparents to escape to when things got bad. I'm just giving examples or suggestions of different ways that we tend to overlay imprints from our early relationships onto our current relationships. And when we do that, we're essentially relating through a memory of something from the past, memory of how it was with our mother or our father or other important people in our lives. Like, how can we be truly present and responsive with the person we're with if we're operating through a memory from the past? Real relating can only happen in the now. And you might notice I've been focusing on the difficulties that face all of us to one degree or another in our early childhood situation with our parents or caregivers. But everyone here at least had a certain amount of love, attunement, positive holding. That's super important in terms of our development. You know, around 1950, the British child psychologist D.W. Winnicott coined the term good enough mother. And somewhere in one of his books, he says good enough is 30%, like being well attuned to the baby 30% of the time, which might seem like kind of a low bar, but I don't know, kids are resilient. Also, a certain amount of misattunement helps motivate the child to actually separate and differentiate. But anyway, you know, if you're a mother of small children trying to be perfectly attuned, as seems to be the ideal these days, we could just remember that 30% is probably good enough. And also, you know, it tends to be more the difficulties and lapses of attunement and lapses of holding that tend to create the deepest grooves and patterns in our psyche, in our consciousness, that pattern the way we show up in our later relationships. That's generally true, but you know, that said, actually good, loving holding can also create imprints. Like maybe if your mother was always super attuned and supportive, and she was supportive of you in every single way, and that might become an expectation, like you expect the people you're close to always support you and love you unconditionally. So like, I don't know, maybe a small lapse in support that another person might find just normal and just brush it off, it could be devastating for you. Challenges, you know, it challenges how you know yourself and what you believe relationships should be. So I think most of us probably understand already that, you know, our early relationships patterned how we're relating as adults, but we want to really unpack our personal early situation around it. See how it really affects us now. Because if we're relating through an early imprint, we're just not being ourselves. We're being an image of ourselves that's based on something that happened long ago. And we're projecting an image or an idea onto the other person. We're not seeing them for who they are in the moment. We're layering onto them some impression from our past relationships. Like, what does who you are now have to do with how your mother or father or brother treated you? But often, you know, even if we're aware of the impact, we just kind of accept it. Like people say, oh, it's just the way I grew up. We want to see and understand our unconscious assumptions around relating, see what's actually true. Seeing and understanding can bring compassion. Compassion's like it's the natural response to hurt. You can let that in. The imprints, these patterns, they can begin to relax, melt. And of course, when we're talking about relating, it can be really sensitive territory. Relationships that can be so satisfying, so fulfilling, and they can also be the source of so much frustration, hurt, disappointment. each of us has our own very personal history and story around relating. So it's good to really pay attention to yourself as we're exploring. Like, check in with your heart right now. Whatever's there, just notice. Take a moment. It's it's sensitive. So to show up authentically in our relationships, it takes courage, actually. When we feel vulnerable, we might tend to move away, create some distance. And again, how we do that is can mirror how it was in a relationship with our early caregivers, our parents, siblings. Like I said, young infants, they go through this natural process of separation and individuation so that they gradually become less dependent on their mother for their physical and psychological well-being. And part of that individuation process involves internalizing an image of the mother, which helps the child tolerate the separation, carrying around mother inside, still holding an inner image, keeping her close. So we have lots of ways of trying to feel separate, even though we still have this inner image of mother. And these ways are trying to feel separate. They're like devaluing, hating the other, anger, withdrawing, holding back in various ways, not feeling, just not expressing. And all of those ways of distancing involve closing our heart, trying not to be hurt. And clearly, when we're separating in those ways, we're actually still in relationship, at least internally. It's like we're angry at the other person, hating the other person, devaluing them, withdrawing from them. But to have a real relationship, we have to have real separation from the other. Otherwise, we're reliant. A real relationship means who you are doesn't depend on the other person. Because only then can you actually be real with them. Otherwise, it's like, an image of yourself relating to an image of the other person. So much of the relating's happening in your own mind. Like, maybe your partner's looking at their phone while you're trying to talk to them. Probably makes you mad, right? Anybody have this experience? My partner's not here, so she can't be nodding. But if it might make you mad. And if you sense under the anger, maybe you feel small and alone, and they seem big and rejecting. So that's a clue that there could be an imprint involved. And we could ask ourselves there, who am I taking them to be? Who am I taking myself to be? So this brings in the second major barrier to being real in relationship, which is attachment. Real relationships can't have attachment. Like if you must have the relationship, then you can't be fully yourself. If you're attached, you're necessarily going to adjust yourself to preserve the relationship. And I'm not talking about just, making compromises or whatever. I'm talking about changing who you are, holding back, not showing up fully. It's like a true relationship means that who you are doesn't depend on the other. You're truly yourself with them, like 100% yourself. And I'm aware that at this point you could be throwing up your hands and saying, of course I'm attached to my relationships. And for sure, we tend to be, more attached to our relationships than just about our close relationships than just about anything else. And I'm definitely not saying you need to not be attached. And, you can't do that anyway. Nobody can decide to not be attached. But what we can do is become conscious of the attachments, inquire into them. One thing we know for sure is that sooner or later, every relationship will be lost one way or another. And when that happens, you probably know when that happens, the attachments tend to kind of like slap us in the face. So we need to come to terms with the attachments, sooner or later. And we want to be aware of how attachment is affecting how real we can be with the other person. Like, when do I reach the edge where I have to hold back, not show up, change myself in order to preserve this relationship? Am I okay with that? Most of us have probably been faced with that question at some point, like if there's a strong disagreement or a betrayal. So if we can just simply see the attachment and how it affects how we relate, that's a big step toward being more real. We can acknowledge the attachment rather than trying to push it away by getting angry or hating or withdrawing. It's vulnerable, but being real in relationships means being vulnerable. Let's see how we're doing on time. I think we're doing good. So now we give you a chance to explore this question for yourself. The diamond approach, our main practice actually is inquiry. So that's what we'll do. And, you know, we inquire into our experience with the attitude, it's important, the attitude of just wanting to find out what's true for us right now, this very moment. We're not trying to get somewhere, not trying to change our experience, not trying to get rid of our attachments or whatever it is. We just want to see the truth of our experience, because when we can see the truth of what's true for us right now, the obscurations, they tend to drop away on their own, just through understanding. So this exercise is going to be in groups of 3. And so after I give the instructions, Andreas will put you into breakout rooms in groups of 3. And, there'll be an opportunity. If you don't want to do the exercise, you can just leave the meeting and come back for the questions and comments. But let me give the exercise first in case you want to do it on your own. That's fine too. So each person is going to take 10 minutes to inquire in the form of a monologue. That means you're just going to speak from where you are about this topic that I'm about to tell you. Just, sense into yourself, say what's true for you. And the inquiry is as follows. Inquire into ways that you do not show up authentic. I think Andreas is going to post this in the chat, I hope. Inquire into ways that you do not show up authentically in relationship. Oh yeah, good. Talk about patterns that you're aware of in your important relationships, or you could focus on just one important relationship. Do you tend to adjust yourself and accommodate the other in order to maintain harmony? Do you feel the other needs to accommodate you to your needs and desires? What do you feel when your needs aren't met? Like frustration, anger, disappointment, self-blame. Are you aware of patterns from your childhood that continue to play out in your adult relationships? That's what I talked about for a while. And like I said, as you inquire, you want to be sensing your inner terrain, your sensations and emotions, and let that be part of the monologue. Like, oh, when I say that, I feel tight in my heart. You just sense into that. The more we can sense ourselves, the more the inquiry can be, alive in the moment. Like, yeah. So see what happens to your inner experience as you talk about your own situation around relationships. And also while you're listening to your partners inquire. So as your partner is inquiring, so you take 10 minutes, then the next person takes 10 minutes. And as the partner is inquiring, you just listen and continue to sense yourself. And you don't want to encourage them or discourage them by nodding or commenting or smiling or other types of feedback. It's really a gift to let someone have their own experience. And if you feel compelled to give feedback or even in subtle ways, you can just sense into what's behind that for you. And also while you're inquiring, you could notice how you're relating to the listeners. Just that can tell you something about your relational patterns. How is it just to be, listened to? So this is in groups of three, like I said, 10 minutes each person for the monologues. There could, I don't know, depending on the number, there could be a group of four. So if there's a group of four, we'll have to adjust the time. So you can take, let's say, 8 minutes to do the monologue each. I think that would work out pretty close. Um, and after each person has done their 10-minute monologue, then there's going to be a 10-minute discussion, group discussion about just what you're seeing about relating. And in the discussion, you're actually relating. So see what that's like. That could be part of the discussion. Oh, when you said that, I feel this. You want to sense your inner experience. And, I just want to encourage you to remember we're investigating sensitive terrain here. So we want to be respectful of each other. This isn't a time to judge each other or give advice or, flirt or whatever. If your partner's in a tender place, just let them be there. Just be present with them. Like you could be sensing, how is it for you to just be with somebody who's hurting?